just as Dorothy and the Wicked Witch charge at each other.
I've always had an issue with the auteur theory. Or simply put, I've always had trouble with the way people put a premium on movie directors. It felt like an oversimplification of the production process. And yeah, at times, I chalk this up to my training as a broadcast communication student. I'm more familiar with the production process of television, where everything and everyone is a blur, and that usually the people you work with on location aren't always consistent. You'd assume that television would be the perfect counter-argument to the auteur theory. It's a piece of media which can be judged for its own attributes, away from the bias of a famous name and personality.
The extremism of those who would use democracy to deny minority rights, to the nationalism that left...
What are you doing? Nothing!
Then I remember Phoebe Waller-Bridge exists, and I'm suddenly fascinated by the idea of the showrunner as the auteur. Phoebe Waller-Bridge isn't the first showrunner to receive recognition. At this point, you could argue that Shonda Rhimes, aka the executive producer of Grey's Anatomy, has become a household name in America. And you know, there are people like Mofat and D&D who I just don't want to talk about. But I think I can safely say that Phoebe Waller-Bridge is probably the only showrunner, well, that I know of, that hasn't annoyed me. And I think a lot of this has to do with the way she writes with her audience in mind.
Do I have a massive asshole?
Which, to be fair, is how you'd assume most television writers work, given the audience-reliant nature of television itself. But I think what sets Phoebe Waller-Bridge apart, at least in my opinion, is the very non-commercialized way she does it. Of course, I can't speak of her own motivations, but watching both Fleabag and Killing Eve back-to-back, then obsessively researching every single thing I could find about Phoebe Waller-Bridge after, made me appreciate the deeply intimate and slightly outrageous way she writes her shows.
Do I have a massive asshole?
For one, neither show seemed overly pretentious in the way a lot of Academy-recognized television shows, looking at you, Sherlock, 2. Nor do they seem to be a money-grabbing piece of media that panders to audience whims excessively.
It's time to see what I can do.
Without any rhyme, reason, or logic to it. Instead, Phoebe Waller-Bridge connects with her audience and works with them instead of around them. And as someone who's genuinely skeptical of the relationship of showrunners, directors, and networks with their audience, I actually really appreciate Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Do I have a massive...
Now, there's a lot I can say about Bridge and how she cares about me as an audience member and blah blah blah. So I'm just gonna try and compartmentalize everything I want to say into 3 very important points. Okay, I know that when academics talk about auteurs, they usually begin with the stylistic or aesthetic choices of the director's existing portfolio and start from there. But I wanted to begin with something which, more often than not, is overlooked: the creative process behind their work. And okay, I start with this because if I could describe Bridge's writing process in one word, it would be unconventional.
The process of writing that play, and then when I started adapting it into the TV show as well, I did the same thing, which is just a million post-its with funny things that could happen to Fleabag, or just funny jokes that I've thought of, or things that have happened to me, and I just put them all up on a wall, and then I started putting them together and see if I could find a narrative and draw the narrative through those funny stories. And then that way I found that there are little cracks in the narrative that I could start filling up with pathos or heartbreak or that kind of way. But then more recently with Killing Eve, this new show that I'm doing, it's an adaptation of a series of novellas, which is a completely different kettle of fish because it's somebody else's work as well. So I have more of a steer of where to go with that. But mainly for me, it's finding the moments of glory, the moments of comedy, and the moments that I know would get me as an audience member, would make me cry, make me laugh, and starting with them and then pulling everything else together, which is actually probably not a very sensible way round of doing it.
I think the way Phoebe Waller-Bridge writes her media makes it difficult to compartmentalize Fleabag and Killing Eve into genres. I mean, the closest genre I would classify Fleabag into is a dark comedy. And even then, I have my reservations about that, because so much of the show is driven by heart and emotion that I feel like it also becomes a tragedy and a family show at the same time.
The next man who walks in here is getting ridden to death. Dad!
Hi.
Do I have a massive...
I know that this isn't unique to her, but genres exist to both meet and subvert expectation. But Phoebe Waller-Bridge does this really well by empathizing and respecting the audience she writes for. In Bridge's original script for the play Fleabag, she talks about the way she makes the audience the heart and center of the experience by studying them. She says, "I am obsessed with audiences, how to win them, why some things alienate them, how to draw them in and surprise them, what divides them. It's a theatrical sport for me, and I'm hooked." And that's what makes her writing style, however erratic and unpredictable it may be, work. She knows what's expected of her, and she understands and internalizes what the audience wants. By writing individual human moments first, then later tying them together structurally, she manages to subvert audience expectation by giving them something which is both unexpected, entirely anticipated, and at times even wanted. Take the final scene of Killing Eve Season 1. On record, Bridge said that every moment of the show was dedicated to having Eve and Villanelle alone in one room. And in the final scene,
You can't.
I can.
yep. I'm going to introduce a concept in the Auteur theory called the Auteur's interior meaning. Interior meaning is one out of the 3 components cited by Andrew Saris in his essay Notes on the Auteur Theory that makes someone the auteur. I won't go into the other 2 because this essay is long enough as it is. You can go instead watch Lindsay Ellis' essay on Michael Bay if you're interested. Anyway, interior meaning is basically the injection of the auteur's worldview into his media text. And in the case of Phoebe Waller-Bridge, well, at least in Fleabag and Killing Eve, her worldview is heavily influenced by women.
Do I have a massive...
I was skeptical about doing a section on Phoebe Waller-Bridge and the woman experience for several reasons. The first being Bridge's own issues with the feminist genre and the concept of a feminist writer as opposed to someone who writes about women. And the second being the fear of oversimplifying the woman experience given the multiplicity of race and class contexts. But, it's a running thing in her shows, and yeah, we're gonna talk about the thing. At the very least, I can say that Phoebe Waller-Bridge subverts our expectation for female sex and attraction in media, especially when her female characters have more agency during sex. It would be unfair to say that Eve, or Villanelle, or Fleabag are the first women on television to come to terms with their sexuality, but Bridge presents their prowess in ways which are unconventionally attractive. Of course, a large part of that can be attributed to the lack of the male gaze in the show's cinematography. Well, at least for the most part. But I don't think I can discredit the fact that Bridge always uses sex as a metaphor for power struggles, which, okay, while not new, becomes interesting when you start to realize the women almost always dominate their partners. Like, always. Now, while Fleabag is a character who generally struggles with control, her sexual encounters always seem to be within her grasp. She never fully relinquishes agency over her sexuality, particularly because its writing's POV never allows it. She even acknowledges this in one of her 4th wall breaks, where she gushes over the performative side of sex.
Gotta think about all the people I can have sex with now. I'm not obsessed with sex. I just can't stop thinking about it. The performance of it. The awkwardness of it. The drama of it.
I could say a lot about the way sex was used as an expositional device in Fleabag, and to some extent, Killing Eve. But for the most part, I felt that Bridge was able to weaponize sex to both heighten the comedic and dramatic moments of the show without compromising the agency and dignity of Fleabag, its main protagonist. And I think that in itself is a form of subversive sex media politics. That, and the fact that Villanelle and Eve had palpable sexual chemistry that Bridge never denied. The eroticism is there. It's text and not subtext, but it's never fully sexualized in a way lesbian sex usually is in mainstream media. And while I guess saying that because it doesn't pander to the male gaze, it's already super sexy for lesbians is somewhat of a stretch. The fact that plenty of others consider it an erotica for women who love women already speaks volumes about the way Bridge writes for women. Or more specifically, LGBTQ women. I'd like to talk more about women who love women, but I'm straight and the word woman no longer sounds like a word, and I don't know if I can actually say these things on air. But it's a thing, and it's a nice thing to see when mainstream television rarely grants their female characters with so much agency and sex in their sex life. Humor. Humor is difficult to talk about, particularly humor in relation to pathos, which, according to Alexander Pope, is an unintentional lapse in mood present in literary works. This is more commonly known as the anticlimax. See Just Right's video on pathos in Marvel movies for more details. On one hand, I understand the backlash against pathos, especially since so many blockbuster movies and shows are afraid of being too sincere. But on the other, I find that tonal dissonance isn't inherently bad. To be fair, I feel like a lot of the existing criticism are directed at movies that lack narrative direction and general cohesion, but tonal dissonance does have the capacity to be weaponized when intentional. And I'm not saying that pathos in Marvel or Star Wars isn't intentional, but my point is that it's possible for pathos to contribute to the overall logic and structural flow of story and narrative. This is what happens in both Killing Eve and Fleabag. This joke happens, then that joke happens later on, then bam, we have an overly emotional moment that was established by the two previous jokes.
Do I have a massive...
Now, okay, tonal dissonance is a Bridge comedy signature. It doesn't work for everyone, but it works for her. A lot of the jokes are random and incredibly funny, and a lot of these jokes cross shows. In both Killing Eve and Fleabag, and okay, technically Crashing, there are tampon jokes and toilet paper jokes. Female hygienic humor is a thing. It's a really funny thing. And I'm ending my essay with her humor, because Phoebe Waller-Bridge would not be Phoebe Waller-Bridge without it. It's basically at the cornerstone of all her works, and another example of how much Phoebe Waller-Bridge understands her audience and her material. I could make another entirely separate video essay on the flexibility of Bridge's humor, but let's end this essay by studying the way she uses jokes to manage audience reaction to the extreme. Sometimes when certain scenes get a little too lascivious or grotesque, jokes serve as palate cleansers which stop the text from overindulging in either violence or sex.
She chopped his knob off.
It helps the audience absorb the plot and the themes without getting distracted by spectacle. Given that Bridge knows that her audience is clever and intelligent, it's not surprising that she uses these moments to let us breathe and take in what we're seeing on screen. Now, my personal gripes with the Auteur still stand. I won't pretend that Killing Eve and Fleabag are the products of Phoebe Waller-Bridge alone. And if it seems like I'm forgetting the effort of the crew and cast members involved, I apologize. But it's easy to see why people get so caught up with auteurs when they're given someone human to attach to. And that's what happened to me and Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Because at the end of the day, Bridge respects her audience. She produces content to be consumed by intelligent viewers. And I adore that about her. I like watching serious things which aren't overly condescending or pseudo-intellectual. It makes me feel like an important part of the production process. It's like being humanized in an industry that usually sees me as numbers or ratings. And she's great for that. Real great. Real great. Hi everyone, this is Ika. Thank you for watching my very first YouTube video. Sorry about the shift in audio quality. I'm not using my mic today. I had to give it back. This is my very first YouTube video, so thanks so much. Actually, my good friend Gillian co-wrote and researched on this video as well, so thank you. Hopefully you liked this video. If you did, please leave a like and comment below, and we can discuss things. I'll do my best to reply to you all. Hope you have a good day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!